Assalamu alaikum and hello, my name is Hashima. Welcome to my channel, and if you are returning, welcome back. On this channel, I share conscious lifestyle inspiration for mind, body, and soul to transform and master the art of you. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you subscribe. In today's video, I'm talking about my experiences of being married to someone who had a drug addiction. This series is not to trauma dump, it is not to overshare, and it is definitely not to bash or expose my ex. It is simply to give insight to people who are going through the situation, who may go through it in the future, and also those who are the support system to these people who are in situations like this. It doesn't have to directly relate to someone who is married to someone who has a drug addiction. It could be other dysfunctional patterns, unhealthy patterns. But I'm specifically talking about my experiences being married to someone who had a drug addiction. We were married for 15 years, and I would say about half of that was me knowing that he struggled with drug addiction. Let me see. So basically we were in a place, and when we got divorced, we had just moved into a new place, and we had only been there for about 3 months. But before that, this video is about the turning point. So this is a turning point where certain things happened where I knew I had to leave. I knew that it was no way that I could continue on. And one of the things when we first, I mentioned this on a previous video. So if you haven't watched the other videos in the series, I suggest you go back to the beginning of the series so that you can know, certain things I referenced. So the thing about us moving was the motivation behind us moving. I encouraged us to move because we were in a place where he was making enough money for us to be living way better than we were living. But once I became aware that he was using again, it was like, okay, now that's making sense why the money's not adding up to the life that we could be living. So in my mind, I thought that instead of confronting him with, having some kind of confrontation, how about I just encourage him to improve our standard of living? Like, you have the means for us to live a better life, so let's go and look, and improve our life. And he agreed. And so that's how we ended up moving into this better place and all of that, because it was like, if I could get his energy, I understood the underlying desire that he had to take care of us. And for the most part, he tried to do that while being on drugs. And of course, we know life doesn't work like that. But I figured that if his money would be spent in a way that was productive and helping his family and things like that, that he wouldn't have money left over to indulge. Silly thought, but that's the way that I worked it out. And where we moved, he loved it, I loved it, the kids loved it, we were flourishing and all that kind of stuff. Well, what I realized is that he was already in a spiral before we moved into the new place, which is why it only took 3 months for it all to come to a head. So ultimately, his behavioral pattern became more unpredictable and erratic. He would have mood swings, and then he would also come and tell me certain stories that seemed to be, like, in hindsight, I feel like he had to have been hallucinating some of these things that he was telling me, but the things that he was telling me were so out of whack and just strange that I started becoming afraid. Like, I started becoming, and I don't mean physically afraid, I started becoming like afraid spiritually, kind of, like, because I was like, what is happening to him? Like, so essentially he started morphing into a different person very quickly after we moved. He just started acting different than he had acted before. He started interacting with the children in a way that was different. He started, talking to them about different things. Like, whatever it was that he was on, it prevented him from being able to control talking. So he would talk incessantly, just talk. And at the time, I didn't realize how much he was talking to the kids until later after we left, and they told me certain things that was happening that I didn't know. But he would do it to me, where he would just be talking, and he would get very irritated if I would interrupt him, if I had a thought, if I just, whatever it was. But it was becoming to the point where I was like, what is he gonna do? Like, I would have to go to work, for example. It would be time for me to leave to go to work, and he would get irritated that I wasn't gonna finish listening to him. But it was inexhaustive. Like, he would talk, and there would be no breaking point where he would be like, oh, okay, well, you gotta go to work. He just became, I don't know, it's like he became a different person. So there was a point where he was doing things that didn't make any sense, and he would come and just tell me some story that was like, made no sense at all. And then there was a point where he stopped caring to tell me stories. So he would be doing a thing that was weird, or have a thing that was weird. It's hard to explain without giving too much detail, but there was just a lot of weird things happening at that time. And again, it happened all the rapid spiral or decline happened within a 3-month period where I was paying attention. If I had been paying attention prior to, then I probably would have noticed it happened. It was happening long before the 3 months that we were in this new place. But I feel like the new place brought it to a head in a different way, because for me, it was a new beginning. And for the children, it was a new beginning. So by us being in this different shift in this new, space where it's like, okay, now we have a cleaner space, a better space, a bigger space. And now we're having all these different plans. It's like we shifted into this different mindset, but then his behaviors weren't matching the life that we were building. And so it made his behaviors look even more exaggerated in that new space that we were living in. He would talk incessantly, and he would also tell stories that were like delusions. I didn't know at the time that they were delusions. I just kept telling him to seek refuge, because the stuff that he would describe to me was like when somebody's not in touch with reality, it was like some of the stories were just kind of like, okay, that doesn't actually make sense to Earth. So are you sure that happened? And then he would get mad, like, what are you saying? What are you saying? And then he would accuse me of using drugs. He was like, are you on drugs? Maybe you're on drugs. And when he started doing are you on drugs? Maybe you're this and maybe you're that. That's when it's like, that's another level, because now you're doing and saying these things in proximity to the children, and you no longer care about covering yourself. It was like, the covering came off, and there was no care or concern anymore for how he moved around, how it affected us, none of that. The next thing that happened in that space was I started closing up. So I stopped interacting with him a lot, because I realized that we were back in that space where any interaction, it could be about anything, it was going to escalate into an argument where he would be doing something crazy. So I stopped interacting with him. I started to just work out, like I said, do ibadah, read more Quran, make more du'as. I was working out, I was studying, I was homeschooling the children. I was doing everything but engaging with him. I was doing everything but feeding our marriage. I had stopped feeding our marriage because I realized that I think he's gone on a dip, and I already said that I'm not doing it with him again. So I'm not going to invest energy into asking him if he's using, asking him what he's using. Anything that was attached to solely him and whatever he had going on, I stopped completely engaging with. I stopped giving any energy to, I stopped feeding. So of course that caused him he went into a tailspin, and he started to get into this antagonistic harassing mode where he was just constantly harassing me. So when I would, for example, if I would ignore him, so he started doing things in this new space where he would follow me around, but walking so close to me that if I stopped, he would bang into the back of me and things like that. So, and I'm telling you these types of details because what ultimately happens when you allow yourself to stay in spaces, any spaces that you recognize are unhealthy for you, it's going to get worse. It doesn't just go away. You have to do something or it's going to escalate. Nothing stays the same at all. Nothing stays the same. So you have to realize that whatever it is that you're trying to ignore or you're trying to put a Band-Aid on, it's going to get worse. Under the Band-Aid, the wound is festering. So he's bumping into me. He's starting to like just walk so close behind me and say things to me that he knows I'm going to have an emotional reaction to, but he knows that up to this point in our entire marriage, I'm always worried about who's going to see. So if there was ever a confrontation with us and it was outside, I would immediately go inside of the house because I don't like, not only do I not like attention, but I cannot stand ghetto arguments, like arguments out in the street or you're on the phone and you're whatever, and you're walking down the street arguing on the phone, or so. I don't like any of that energy. So he knows this. So he's talking to me, saying, antagonistic, ugly things to me with the kids across the room. So it's like, I'm poking you to see if you're going to yell or if you're going to just take it. So this is what kind of stuff started happening regularly. And so what I ended up doing was I would leave the house and stay out of the house. And the kids would be messaging me and saying, are you coming back to the house? Are you coming back to the house? And and by the way, I said, we moved into a space and we were only there for 3 months. So this may have been the duration of a couple weeks where this kind of stuff was going on. and this is a couple weeks before I actually left and never went back. I would leave the house and just stay gone. One day, okay, so in the midst of this, and this is kind of all over the place because it's hard for me to remember exactly, and I'm having to pull up things that are kind of a little emotional. Like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like when you talk about a thing, you really kind of feel it. Even if you're over it, you can still go back to that space where you felt this feeling. So I remember there was one day where one of my nephews was, man, he was my ace at this time because I was getting advice from him on how to navigate certain situations, like without it being a confrontation, because I was like, I need a male, I need a male voice and advice. And so I knew I could trust him, and I talked to him. And it was one day that I was on the phone with him for hours waiting for my ex-husband to leave the house. Hours. And what I was doing at that time was I would walk and run. This is when I first started my walking and running very regularly. So I would walk and run and walk and run, and I was doing that. And it was a point, I had done like 50 miles that day because I was on the phone with my nephew and I was just waiting for him to leave, and he was not leaving. And part of the reason why he was not leaving is because he would get stuck in these cycles or loops of behaviors. Like he would do things like iron for 2 hours straight. And it was like he was stuck in the activity of ironing and he couldn't stop himself. And so I would go check and see, or call the kids and say, is he still there? And then, but at this time they didn't know I was avoiding him. I would just call and, say something else and then ask, oh, is he still there? But that's ultimately what happened. The emotional, or the thing that happened inside of me emotionally, was that with me getting to this space where I'm like, my life is not going to change unless I do. I had this internal shift where it was like I could no longer take myself seriously with everything that I was doing out in the world, with my YouTube channel, my content, and just my passion and my purpose and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I can't be talking to people about things that I'm not living. My life has to be a reflection of what I am advising others to do, and just a reflection of who I actually am. And what was happening in my life was incongruent with who I am. And so things just, for me, have to make sense, and they weren't making sense. So I was like, I just can't. So the internal shift was just that, I was much closer to Allah. I was doing more reading of Quran. I was doing more reading of, religious books, and just enriching myself in a way that I felt so strong. And I was just like, so there was an internal shift that happened. Now, when we first got there, I had notified one of his family members that he was starting to act in a way that I had never seen before. Like, I was like, whatever is going on, because they know their brother. So I was just like, they know him, but this new stuff that I'm seeing is not anything that I even think they're familiar with. So it was kind of like to let them know that if y'all hear from him and he's acting weird or, anything like that, this has been something that's been going on recently. I don't know what it is, whatever. So, and that was one reach out that I did, that it was like, it was me kind of letting it be okay for me to reach out to someone, but also putting someone on alert, because I was not sure what his behavior was leading to, and I was so scared. And I felt almost like, that's a whole nother video for another day, but so yeah, I'm doing all these things, and it was just not matching up with, me being in a situation with him. And I started not just, just like saying, this lifestyle is not fitting for you and where you are at this point in your life. Not that it ever did, but it was like, too much, you're aware of too much, you have too much experience and knowledge to be in this type of situation. So the final incident that happened before I moved out it had been an escalation where we didn't talk anymore around the house. There was no interaction. I tried to keep my interaction with him to a minimum, because I knew that each interaction was going to lead to something that I didn't want. For one, for the children to be around, but of course I didn't want to experience. And I didn't know where it was going to go, because I was now starting to feel physically unsafe because of his antagonistic following me around the house. And when I would leave the house to go to work, he would start texting me or calling me back to back and texting me, ugly stuff and things like that. Now, mind you, this is after he knew that I was leaving. And so this was one of the reasons why I previously had avoided leaving, because I knew that he was going to go through an unraveling unlike anything that I had ever seen. And so, you know, but I was determined that, you know, my life, I have to change my life for my children and for myself. I can't do this anymore. So, you know, I just kept, you know, I just stayed focused, and I was just like, if I just minimize my interactions. And one of the things that I was doing was trying to make it look like I wasn't minimizing my interactions. So I would, you know, be super busy, just kind of like, oh no, I just have to go here. Oh no, I have to do this. I have to do that. Because I knew that if he became aware that I was gathering everything together to be like, how is this gonna end? That it was gonna get ugly. So the one incident was where I was preparing to leave for work. I would take the children with me because his behavior was so weird that I started to take them with me. They started to ask me to come with me. So I would take them with me. At this time, I was doing deliveries. I was doing Uber Eats and DoorDash at this time. And so I would take the kids with me. And I had this rigid schedule just to keep me on track with everything. Like, I filled my entire day with things. And so I was carrying bone broth because I would drink it every single day. And I would heat it up and head out to work and let it cool as I'm driving it, you know, whatever, and drink it. And so he was following me around the house, and the children had become aware that he was antagonizing me. And so the oldest was, at the time, the oldest of our 3 children was around 9 or 10. And so he was, you know, trying to be protective, you know, are you okay, Umi? Like, is everything okay? And he was doing that. Just kind of, they were following us kind of around the house, watching their father, and looking at my facial expressions to see what was going on, to see if what they were feeling was what it was. But they were also very mature in the fact that they knew not to escalate it, which is kind of, you know, it's more sad than anything that they had already learned how to kind of navigate the mood swings and stuff. But so I was heading out the door. He had been following me around the house, but I was like, whatever I'm doing, I just need to stop and get out of this house. And so I was leaving, and as I got to the top of the stairs, I'm holding my 3-year-old's hand, and I'm holding this bone broth in the other hand. And he walks up briskly behind me in an aggressive way and bumps me to where the bone broth jumps out of the cup and spills down the steps. And my son was at the bottom of the steps, the oldest of the 3. He was at the bottom of the steps, and he starts yelling up the steps, "Why are you messing with her? Leave her alone. What are you doing? Why are you messing with her? Leave her alone." And he was, you know, talking back, "Don't be disrespectful. Who you talking to?" and all this. And he was like, "You know what you're doing. Leave her alone. Why are you acting like this?" So he followed us down the stairs and, you know, was just acting impish. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. Just kind of just antagonizing and, you know, whatever. So as I drove off, you know, this thing washed over me that I don't even know, like, I didn't know, I hadn't determined at the time that I was going to go anywhere, but I was just like, I couldn't see another day without him doing something very drastic. I just didn't see, the escalation was too much. There are certain things, defining moments for different people, that it's like, I can never go back to normal after this. Or not normal, but, you know, I can never go back. Like, something could happen at a job and you're like, I will never return to that job again after that incident happened. So it was like, to me, that was a defining moment for me, because I'm like, so now I'm gonna come home from work and cook dinner? Like, it just didn't make sense. So Allah saved me, because about 10 minutes after I left, one of his family members called and said, "Where are you and where is he? Are you home? If you are home, you need to leave." So I was like, you know, what do you mean? And they were like, whatever he called, and he is acting crazy, and he's saying all kinds of crazy things, and I have never seen him act like this before, and I don't think you're safe. Like, you basically, you and the kids, y'all need to not be in the house with him, because we don't know what's going on with him, but you need to find somewhere to be, basically. You do not go back to that house. And so that was it. I called one of my family members and let them know what was going on, how it had escalated, and, you know, and this happened to be a family member who knew that something was going on, so it wasn't like a complete shock. And the family member was like, "Come to my house." And after I went and worked that day, I think I went and worked. I'm not even sure if I was able to work that day. I can't remember if I went to work or if I went to their house. But after that, I contacted the landlord, and here's the thing. So, and this is just for the context of the story. Prior to the escalation and him running around the house and doing all this stuff, he had let me know that he had stopped paying the bills. So he had let me know that we were going to be evicted. So that was before. So the escalation and part of why we were not speaking was also because he had let me know that he had completely stopped paying the bills, and he had told me that he had paid them. So we were well beyond the late fees and this and that. We were well beyond that point. So I had to speak to the landlord. So anyway, that is how we ended up being gone, and also how we ended up being in a space of leaving this place that we had just gotten into 3 months prior. So I had made an arrangement with the person, the landlord, and being let out of the contract and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, and that is how we ended up not together anymore. The divorce and all those different things and those details I will not go into, but that was the turning point that led me to, I cannot return after this. That is the end. I'm so grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for arranging my affairs in a way and disposing of my affairs in a way that, you know, spared me of a lot worse that could have happened. But yeah, so that's going to be it for this particular video. If you have any questions, leave your questions below. Share this video if you think that it would benefit someone. Subscribe to the channel if you have not. And yeah, stay tuned for episode 5. I can't remember what topic I'm going to be dealing with in that particular episode, but yeah, stay tuned. That's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.